Hey guys, we can't hear you. You're muted still.
Hey, can you hear us now?
Yes, thank you. So go ahead and unmute yourself on Zoom. And by yourself, I mean Becky. You're gonna need to stay unmuted because we can't hear you talking right now. And by you, I mean anyone in the room who's talking right now. You can see your mouth moving, but there's no words.
How about now?
There we go. Okay, we can hear something. Cool.
All right. So I'll start over. Welcome to the Walker Forum. Today we're going to be talking about the navigating the impacts of growth along the Wasatch Front. The Walker Forum is a partnership between the Walker Institute and the Office of Economic Development at Weber State University. The purpose of our forum is to provide updated content and data and information from experts, subject matter experts in our region about nascent topics along the Wasatch Front, whether it's community development, educational development, workforce, or economic development. And today we're going to be talking about the growth and the huge growth that we're expecting along the Wasatch Front. It's supposed to be a networking and a very interactive event. So please, if you have questions, if you're online, please type your question in the Q&A and we'll ask those questions at the appropriate time. But we do hope to create conversation. So for those online, please share a question or a comment in the Q&A portion. Those in person, just go ahead, feel free to raise your hand. With that is the housekeeping ideas. Then next, I'd like to introduce Andrew Gruber, who's the Executive Director of the Wasatch Front Regional Council. And they do an excellent job of planning and coordinating all the inter-county and inter-city organizational ideas that need to occur to make sure our growth is consistent and well planned. So I'll introduce Andrew. Thank you very much, and everyone have a great day.
Well, thank you so much, Guy. It's really great to be here at Weber State University, Davis campus, and also at the Walker Institute. Guy, Devin Weiser, who runs the Walker Institute. It's really terrific to be here with all of you. I don't need to tell you this. Weber State's an amazing institution and asset to our entire community. And we're just thrilled, myself and my fellow panelists are really thrilled to be able to be here today to talk about maybe the omnipresent issue that we're confronting in Utah right now, which is growth, right? Well, maybe the omnipresent issue today is the elections, but here we're here to talk about growth. Now we know that here in Utah we have incredibly high quality of life, right? We've got an amazingly strong economy. We've got friendly and neighborly communities. We've got just unparalleled access to the great outdoors. So quality of life is really, really high. And one of the results of that quality of life being so high is that growth that I just mentioned. In fact, over the past 10 years, according to the Census Bureau, Utah is the fastest growing state in the entire nation. And as we look ahead out over the next 20 or so years, our population is going to grow by several million people. And the majority of that population is right here on the Wasatch Front. So you just have to think for a moment about the potential impacts of that population growth, right? We're already experiencing real challenges with housing supply and affordability, traffic congestion, air quality, water consumption, the access and availability of jobs. So overall, really, our quality of life. And, you know, I think that what this really means to us is that we can't take our quality of life for granted here in Utah. And so, I mean, I tend to think about this. I have two kids. One of them just graduated from college. The other is in college, not here, different school, sorry. But like, will they be able to live here when they grow up and raise a family here? And maybe even more to the point, will they want to live here and raise their families here? And that depends on what we do together as public and private and community leaders, and what we do to shape the future of our community. And I think that's really what we're here to talk about today. And so with that, I am so thrilled that we have three terrific panelists. Well, two of them are here and one will be here shortly. I think maybe he's teaching a class right now and he'll come in shortly. Mallory Bateman from the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. She is going to talk about the sort of nature and components and projections for growth in Utah and in this area. Then we have Bert Gramberg from the Wasatch Front Regional Council, my colleague at WFRC, who is going to give an overview of the analytical tools and resources that are available to support growth planning. And then Dr. Ryan Frazier, who is up with Weber State University, and he's going to talk about the importance of good community planning. Okay, so that's the basic outline for what we're going to do today. The good news, I think, is that a lot is already happening. And I know many of you out there and many of you that are here in the audience in person today are deeply involved in working for the future of our communities and planning for the future and making decisions. And at our organization that Bert and I work at, the Wasatch Front Regional Council, our job, we're a government entity that works across the region of the Wasatch Front and brings together mainly city and county leaders, elected officials, public and private sector, community organizations, state legislature, other stakeholders to plan for the future of growth, particularly transportation, but also land use and economic development. Not that we know how to do it best, but that we take that regional perspective and a long-term view and try to bring good data and good information and planning to the way that we grow in Utah. So that's what the role of the Wasatch Front Regional Council is. And I'm just going to do a quick preview of this, and I'll ask our friend here to help us with putting up on the screen an image of what we call the Wasatch Choice Vision. And this is a regional vision for our area, for the Wasatch Front. And what you can see on the screen here now is the segment of that Wasatch Choice Vision that covers basically northern Davis County up into Weber County. And what this vision is it looks out all the way to 2050. And what is the vision and plan that we have collectively, all of us, for how our community should grow and it should develop? What is the key transportation, roads, transit, active transportation, so that people have transportation choices, which is one of the key strategies of the vision? Where does growth get focused in opportunities for growth to occur in centers that the local communities have identified as being good places to absorb more, perhaps multifamily housing or different types of housing options that there's more demand for now than there is supply, but in areas that are coordinated with transportation. And you see those as those red, orange, and yellow centers identified on the map, which I should note, by the way, that the whole area on that map there that's in green, that's either open space, so we can preserve open space, or right on the Wasatch Front in green in Davis and Weber counties, that's area that we presume will continue to be predominantly single-family residential. And so my point of this is that we provide a balance of choices, housing options for people into the future. So not everybody's going to want to live in a downtown area like, downtown Ogden or Layton or whatever. But if people want that choice should be there for them. And if they want something else, more quieter, single-family residential neighborhood, then that choice should be there too. So that's one of the key strategies. I also mentioned already preserving open space. And there I'm talking about the mountains that we love so much and are sort of core to our identity as Utahns, but also parks and trails woven right through the fabric of our community. So people can ride their bikes and get out and walk and engage in their community in the outdoors. And then the sort of fourth key strategy in this Wasatch Choice Vision is coordinating all that stuff together. Where's our transportation? Where's our housing? Where are we encouraging job creation to occur? And thinking about the relationship of all of those things. And I just even in the room here, there's local elected officials, and there's community, city and county planners, and there's business leaders. And this takes all of us doing this together, right? All of us working to coordinate the way that our community grows. Now, and you can take that down if you will. The last thing, thank you so much. The last thing I want to say is, just when I'm talking about having this vision for the future of the region, I got to be clear, there is no one size fits all, right? There's no one right approach. And if you think about it in let's say in a Weber County context, what makes sense in Ogden City, in downtown Ogden, which is the urban heart of Weber County, is going to be different than what may make sense in, take Roy City, right? Which is a predominantly residential community, but in Roy City, they've decided of late, after a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of meetings, that they've identified two areas in their community around the Front Runner Station and their downtown, where they think that's a good area to have a mix of uses, a mix of housing types and jobs and shopping, but that the majority of the remainder of the community should stay as single family residential. So it's a different type of development strategy than what works in Ogden. And then continuing to the west, take Hooper, which is a community that has had historically much more of a single family residential and in some cases a rural feel. So what works in Hooper is going to be different than Roy, is going to be different than Ogden, and you could translate that across the entirety of the Wasatch Front. Now, that does not mean that on any of those communities that everything is going to stay the same as it is today. I don't need to tell you this, right? Everybody knows this. We are growing so fast that change is coming. And the question is, how do we navigate that change? How do we navigate that change in a way that means that our kids and grandkids will have a place that they can afford to live and that they'll want to live? And that we're able to preserve the character of our communities, the things that we love about them today. And so striking that balance, that's the trick, right? We can't say no to growth because the majority reality is it's our own kids and grandkids. Mallory will tell us more about this, but the majority of our growth is our own children and our grandchildren. So we can't say no to it. But at the same time, we also have to focus on what are the most important things that we love about Utah and we want to preserve about Utah. And therein lies the challenge. And this challenge is a live one. It's happening right now. Some of you online and in the room here know that these conversations about handling growth issues are raging right now in Utah at the local election level, like yesterday, and then also at the state legislative level, where there are extensive conversations happening around policies and investments and legislation to help address some of these growth issues so that we can keep Utah at the forefront of quality of life in the nation. So with that overview, that's all we got to figure out. And we're going to do it today in the next hour and 45 minutes, right, Guy? Okay. So now with that, I am now going to turn to my friend and colleague, Mallory Bateman. Mallory, I know this by heart, but I'm going to read it anyway. Mallory is a senior research analyst and the Utah State Data Center coordinator at the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. Affiliated with another university, but that's okay. She's welcome here, right?
Thank you.
She's focused on research and community engagement in Utah. She has a bachelor's degree in urban planning from the University of Utah and a master's in social policy and planning from the London School of Economics. And Mallory is going to give us an overview of the growth that is occurring in Northern Utah. Mallory, take it away.
Thanks. Okay. I don't know how to, well, I'll turn a little bit so I can kind of see the screen. But as Andrew mentioned, I'm Mallory Bateman and I'm over at the Gardner Institute. We're part of the U. You'll notice a lot of red in my slides. So sorry, that's just kind of how we do things in our shop. But as the state data center coordinator, I'll just let all of you know that I'm a resource to you. That's a local partnership with the Census Bureau. And so if you ever have questions on Census Bureau programs or products, feel free to email me or give me a call and I will do my best to help you sort out what you need. So if you want to do the next slide. So as Andrew mentioned, we were the fastest growing state this decade. Woo, very exciting, 18.4%. We ended up at 3,271,616 people, and we added nearly 508,000 new Utahns. I will say that's a little bit less than the previous 2 decades. So you can see on this chart, the red line is our population growth from 1890. So that's when we were still a territory, but we were at least the right shape. We do show up in earlier censuses, but if you look at the Utah territory footprint, it's massive. So I don't go back that far, but you can see prior to 1960, we had a different, well, prior to 1940, we had a different growth trajectory. 1940 to 1970, 80, you can see kind of an uptick in our slope of our growth. And then in the 1990s, you can see a pretty steep incline. And so for those of us that have been here for the past 30 years, you've seen a lot of change in the state. Even the past 10, even the past 2. As Andrew mentioned, we're always growing, we're always changing here. The stars on the line indicate when we hit millions. So this is just kind of background into looking into the future. We like to be informed about how we look forward, so we look back. So we hit 1 million people in 1966, 2 million in 1995, and then 3 million in 2015. So that uptick in the 90s really kind of changed our trajectory of our growth. I'll also throw in the gray line on here is households. And the dynamics of our households have also changed as we've grown as a state. I'm not going to get into that here, but we do have some resources available on the Gardner website if you're interested. So if we're going to do the next slide. From the 2020 census, we got some great information. We have the redistricting data now, and obviously that's used for the redistricting purposes, but then also by us as the baseline for looking forward, but also getting that imprint of what our communities looked like on April 1st, 2020. Everyone mark your calendar for April 1st, 2030. It's gonna be a great day, that census day. Already planning my party. So the darker shades on this map indicate larger populations. This was the total population for Census Day. Salt Lake County is still our biggest county, almost 1.2 million. Utah County, 660,000. And then you can see the darker shades in northern Utah. It's a little hard to see on the screen, but darker shades in northern Utah and then darker shades down in southwestern Utah. And those are kind of our core areas of growth. Looking at the data throughout the decade, the Wasatch Front, so Davis, Weber, Salt Lake, and Utah counties had been 75% of our population statewide, and that remains true in the 2020 data. And then if you add in Cache and Washington, those populations, you're at 85% of the population living in 6 of our counties. So that's just, thinking about space, thinking about planning. We do have some interesting dynamics here. We do have a lot of space in the state, but it might not be, usable. It might not be private that can be built on. So just, I'm sure you're all well aware of the land use potential issues in your communities. So if you want to do the next
Mallory,
slide.
before you move on, let me note one thing for our audience online and here. If you have questions about what we're talking about here, I'm looking at Guy to confirm this is right. That people can put them in the chat.
Or Q&A or chat.
Okay, in the Q&A or the chat. Okay, and what we'll do is after each of our 3 panelists, we'll have just a few minutes for some specific questions on what the panelists talk about, and then we're going to have some time at the end after all 3 panelists go to just have some discussion and input and ideas where we can all talk. All right, so that's what so if you have questions or points you want to raise, be thinking about them and drop them into the chat or the Q&A. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll throw out now, I'm gonna get to the change, the things that impact our changes, but we don't have any data on Californians moving here at this point, especially during COVID. So please.
So don't ask that question.
I can't answer that question.
The answer is there's a lot.
We don't have it in the census data, the decennial data, because it's April 1st. If we think about when COVID kind of landed early in the time frame. So happy to talk about it more later, but we don't have the Californians. So the fastest growing communities in the state were added the most people were largely in northern Utah County and southern Salt Lake County. If anyone, if you've driven that corridor anytime, I feel like every time I've driven it in the past 5 years, there's some new big development. So the blue on this chart indicates the 2010 populations. You can see Vineyard, you can't even see the population because it was like 139 people. And then the red outline is the 2020 population. And so you can see, you know, a lot of these communities doubling, adding a lot of people. And you can see, and sorry, Bluffdale's on here twice because there's a little sliver that falls in both Salt Lake and Utah counties. Thanks for that boundary. But there's that growth down in that area is very intense and very dynamic. Looking up here, and I'm sorry I didn't include this, but Layton was one of the added the most people up in this neck of the woods. And the communities up, at least in Davis County, largely grew with, you know, smaller communities adding several hundred residents to Layton adding over 14,000. So just because that southern part of the valley is experiencing this wild growth doesn't mean everyone else isn't experiencing it too. If you want to do the next slide. So this is looking at the 2010 data. We don't have this for 2020 yet, but looking at kind of the balance point of the population. So if every person weighed the same in the state, where our balance would be, where we would hit that place. And you can see that it moved north in the 70s, but then has been moving south and west for the past 40 years, and thinking about the fact that southwestern Utah continued to be a strong area of growth, and that southern Salt Lake County, northern Utah County area also was a strong area of growth. I think that this is probably going to follow that trajectory. We'll see when we get a minute to analyze it, because we have been neck deep in projections. So if you want to do the next slide. The things that create, I know this is kind of basic, but it's also important to just think about when you're planning for your communities. The things that create that population change are natural increase, so that's births minus deaths, and then net migration, so people moving in minus people moving out. Those are the two things we look at in this demographic calculation. And you can see on this figure, the gray area is net migration. You can see before that 1990 uptick in our, you know, the red line from a previous slide, we have a little bit more up and down in that net migration. If you look even farther back, that wave of in and out migration is kind of a reliable picture for how our population changed. And that part of that is due to our economy being less diverse in those previous decades. We were a lot more dependent on extraction industry or on federal spending, or on, we had, you know, the one big thing that was kind of driving our economy. Fortunately, our economy has continued to diversify since the 90s. And I'm sure, you know, seeing all the development up here, seeing all the things going on in this region, you're all well aware of that. But that diversified economy makes us more attractive, as Andrew said, to people moving here. And it's made us have net migration, so more people moving in than moving out since the 1990s. You can see the one little blip on here where it goes below the 0 line, and that's in the Great Recession. So, I mean, everyone's data looks a little funky at that point. The red line on here is natural increase. That's the births minus deaths. And that's kind of driven by births and deaths. But you can see that since 2010, that line has kind of taken a decline. Part of that is our fertility rates and our total births are declining. If you saw a blast of articles about, you know, oh, our declining birth rate, the US isn't growing, this is wild, in August, it's because, or in April, the 2 census releases have indicated a lot more moderated growth throughout the nation. Kind of popping back a couple of slides, the first release, the apportionment data, was the lowest percentage change nationally that we've had since 1930 to 1940. So that's another thing, like our fast growing region is not necessarily what's happening everywhere in the US. So we've got declining births, and then we've also got an aging population. We're not as old as other states. We're the youngest state, in fact. But we still have a large generational cohort that's aging, and, you know, if you're lucky enough to age, there's kind of an end point. So that's where the deaths come in.
Kind of.
Kind of try to make that as uplifting as I can, but you know, so we've got these two factors that are kind of bringing that natural increase line down. And so the net migration is playing a more and more important role in our growth. If you want to do the next slide. So as Andrew mentioned, the past decade, our growth was largely due to natural increase. So just under 2/3 of our growth in the past decade came from natural increase, and over 1/3 came from net migration. Again, nothing on who the people are, where they came from, what their bank account looks like, how they're able to buy cash houses, none of that yet. But you can see, I pulled out the counties just so you can see kind of the different drivers. And you can see for some of the natural increase counties, really high percentages, and that's because there was maybe out migration, and the natural increase compensated for the loss of people moving out. And then the net migration counties, there's some kind of similar things here that I've just noticed anecdotally, like Morgan County, Summit County, Washington County. They are places that have been attractive to movers for a long time, but it's also a unique kind of mover that's going to these places, maybe retirement migration, or people that don't necessarily need to be part of the labor force. They get to just enjoy life and mountain bike or whatever. So there's some different dynamics throughout the state. And if you want to do the next slide. So this is looking, sometimes it freezes on me too. So if I gave you a busted presentation. The next slide, if and when it does appear, will show the counties and the different growth that we've experienced. And I'll say that this was seen nationally. Urban areas and kind of suburban areas grew, and the rural areas, smaller communities, either didn't grow or they declined. And we saw that here as well. You can see, you know, we had 7 counties that lost population throughout the decade. I know Daggett closed the jail, and so that's kind of a big impact on a county of 1,000 people. I know it was one of my first discoveries when I started at my job, so that's why it sticks out to me. I was like, oh, did you see the article about the Daggett jail closing? And everyone blew their lids because we had just put out our population estimates. Anyway.
Before you go on, is the presentation showing on the screen? I mean, I know it's on this screen, but for the folks online, I want to make sure that they're getting it shared on their screen as well. Yeah.
We cannot see it currently.
I can dance and show you the beautiful. I mean, it's just, you know, it's not a big deal.
Okay, now you're back.
Okay, so looking at the past decade, Salt Lake County added the most people. That was one thing that was kind of interesting for us at Gardner. We had kind of thought Utah County might bump up and beat Salt Lake County, but that prediction wasn't quite right. But then you can also see that you know, again, Northern Utah, Southwestern Utah have the growth, and then you have some kind of different experiences in the rest of the state. The percentage growth kind of provides a different picture of the same story, showing those neighboring communities to the Wasatch Front, with Utah County popping, obviously, but Wasatch County having a lot of growth, Tooele County having a lot of growth, Morgan County. So these areas that are near, depending on your definition of how long your drive is, but relatively close to the urban core, experiencing growth, and other parts of the state experiencing decline. And if you want to do the next slide. Okay, so.
And while we're at, can you shift the view to the, there you go. Perfect.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay, so I hate to break it to you, I can't share our population projections because they are like in late stage draft right now. We're still finalizing some things because we got some great feedback from community partners like the Wasatch Front Regional Council and Mountain Land Association of Governments, Washington County. So some tweaks are still being made, but we do anticipate continued growth in the state. I think I can speak broadly and say that those urban areas, those large population centers will continue to be large population centers into the future. I'm not going to give any specifics on anything because honestly, I don't know because these iterations keep kind of tweaking a little bit, but we anticipate continued growth throughout the region. And if you can do the next slide, I want to talk a teeny bit about kind of our process. Oh, you dumb slide. Anyway, one thing that we've done this year, so this is the second round of population projections that Gardner has been responsible for. It used to be done at the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget and then got shifted over to us a couple years ago. And so this is our second round and we're kind of in a unique opportunity because we get to use our research university expertise combined with our community expertise of our partners. And we really wanted to integrate your local knowledge more. And so one of the things that we've really focused on this time around is trying to do a little bit more detailed external review with our partners, trying to lean into local knowledge and make sure that things make sense. So I want you all to know that like we've tried to vet them through community partners. Obviously it was our first time kind of really putting a concerted effort into that. So there's room for improvement moving forward. But we've also considered things like the constraints and policy choices through land use. Wasatch Front and MAG have created a really cool land use inventory and analysis tool. We did something similar down in Washington County just to know with the current situation or with general plans, what could we build to? How many people could live here with the constraints we have? We've also considered a couple specific economic things in the modeling that I could get into later, but if you want to do the next slide. We've also used the economic regions that we created at the Gardner Institute in the modeling process this time around. And it's not just for the economics. Our model uses an economic component and then a demographic component, and they work together. But these economic regions helped us decide how to allocate population and jobs throughout. You start with the state, then you go to the region, and then you look at the relationships with the counties within the region to kind of determine, you know, what goes where in a way that makes sense. And so this is one kind of new thing we've done this time around. And so those relationships between counties are really important. And we recognize, you know, the Wasatch Front is it's not that big, relatively speaking, but it's a very interconnected place with these other areas. You know, those areas like the Uinta Basin or Carbon and Emery County that have close relationships, that's considered in the modeling as well. And then if you want to do the next slide. And then this is just kind of something we've also tried to think about this year, that these are planning projections and we're working with the best assumptions we have at this point. We can't consider everything. Unfortunately, sometimes you can't model like a cool idea if there's not the data behind it, but it can inform how we look at the numbers. And this is just a reminder that the work that you do in your communities influences what that future number is. Like this is one view of the future with these population projections, but if there's a big policy change, if there's a big investment in affordable housing, that population number could look different. And I want to put out that we get to revisit these long-term projections every 4 years, and then we have a shorter term 10-year window that we do every 2 years. So we already have a list of things we want to keep investigating as we move forward and interacting with. But know that we're trying to consider as many of these policy things as we can in a sensible, logical way in this modeling process. And if you want to do the next one, that's just my contact information. So if you do ever have any questions, feel free to reach out and I will do my best to help you if I can, but if not, I'll find the right person. So that's the end of my.
Mallory, thank you so much for giving that comprehensive and really clear overview of the work of the Gardner Policy Center. And we have a few minutes if there's anybody in the room or online that has any specific questions for Mallory. I'll just start off. You were talking at the end about that relationship between policy and population, and kind of in a more technical or academic way, noting, I think, the same thing that I was noting up front, which is that our population and our growth is not fixed. The decisions that we make as communities now will have an impact on, like I said before, how many of our kids and grandkids choose to live here, want to live here, can afford to live here, or need to go somewhere else. Now, of course, it also has an impact on people coming into our state. We have great quality of life in our state. And so it's one of the reasons that people have come here, particularly during the pandemic, with the ability to telecommute. So much of our population growth and patterns of development depend on the decisions we make. So let me ask you sort of a general question, comparing Utah to other states. Utah's a special place.
It is a special place.
And for a lot of good reasons. But do you think, like, at forums like this around the country where people are talking about issues related to the census or whatever, is this type of conversation happening everywhere else in the country, or is there Utah different in terms of what we're dealing with in growth and population trends from other places around the country?
I think in the Intermountain West, there are some similarities. And I think that's suburban growth too. So if you looked at like the 10 fastest growing communities in the US, there were like 3 in Texas that were just these little farm towns that are near Austin that exploded, or Meridian up by Boise was on that list. South Jordan was on that list. So I think there's some similar dynamics, at least out in this direction. But I'll also say that in Utah, because we've grown and because we've tried to be strategic about our growth, and we have these partnerships in the community, that is pretty unique. I went and talked a couple years ago about the Unified Transportation Plan to a group of planners back east, and they were like, "Oh, honey, that's really cute. Like, that's cute that you all can talk to each other. And thanks for coming."
And that's not the way it works
here. That's not what we do. And so I do think we do have a unique, like, we're growing and we're becoming bigger, but we're still small enough that we can interact with each other in a way that's productive. So I think that helps.
Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, I'm going to do an informal poll, at least of the folks in the room here. If you were born in Utah, raise your hand. Okay. And if you moved here from somewhere else, raise your hand. I'm going to raise my hand. It's about, and so this is interesting, because at least in the room, I mean, people online, you can't see this, but in the room, it was about 60-40, 60% people who were born here, about 40% coming from elsewhere, which is directly consistent with what you put on the screen and showing the makeup of our population changes over time. So, yeah. Okay, now let's see, Guy, do we have questions that we want to get to here?
Yeah, we have a question from a gentleman who asks, in considering the quality of life in Utah, why is the quality of education not included in the analysis?
Okay, I'm going to make sure that folks online, are everybody going through this microphone? I don't know if there's any way I can see that people could hear that, but I'm going to assume people heard that. Oh, and you can see the question also.
You can also see the question, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, do you want to take a shot at that one?
I will say that this policy consideration, this is the first time we're kind of really focusing on that. And so we tried to hone in on kind of big things that we knew we could maybe get data for. I think the educational issue in Utah is a very big policy question. And so I don't know that we're the appropriate place for that, but maybe in the future, I'll also throw out that the State Board of Education and the State Higher Education, USHE, I know the acronyms, but I don't know that I have all the words right. But we did consult with them on this process as external reviewers, and it's coming maybe from a slightly different angle of thinking about student enrollments and what that looks like for them. But we're at least engaging with those partners. I don't know that we can get to every policy issue in education.
I'll just add to that, the question of education quality is a critical one. And I think intuitively, as the question implies, we know that the ability to get a good education in Utah is one of the critical elements to quality of life. whether families decide that they want to locate here, how to project or model the relationship between education quality or education investment and projecting population growth. That's a tricky one. But so maybe this falls more into the general notion of policy relationship, but in terms of doing projections like the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute does, that's going to be a hard one.
We do rely on economic inputs and demographic inputs, and our fields of study are kind of economics and demographics. So I think that's the other thing. We want to work with our specialties in the right way. And so as of right now, that would be going pretty outside the bounds of our specialty.
All right, we're going to do one more question here, and then we're going to move on to our next panelist. And a reminder to everybody, we're going to have some time for discussion and dialogue at the end as well. Okay, we had a question about education, and then there's also a question about water. So just two little issues, education and water, right? Can you talk to water use given growth projections? Mallory, how does water availability factor into the growth projections that Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute does?
So we looked to other Western states to see if anyone else was doing this. And we got a lot of feedback of, yeah, that would be great. If you figure it out, then let us know. So this is a thing that is on top of mind for a lot of people doing similar work throughout our region, but no one has a good answer to it. We kind of looked to land use planning. So we're relying on our local communities. If you're considering water as a potential constraint, you're going to maybe develop less. We made sure to pay attention to Oakley and the other community that kind of put a moratorium on their growth. We're keeping an eye on those kind of things. But it's another thing that's kind of a external factor that we don't right now have a very good explicit way, but land use constraints were kind of our sort of proxy.
Mm-hmm.
Down in Washington County, in the land use study we did down there, it did not seem like that was considered a factor to limiting growth for many of the communities and their planning approaches. So I'll put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard said that water is the great limiter to growth now and particularly in the future. I also know that there's dialogue happening right now with the governor's office, with the League of Cities and Towns and others about doing a better integration. Kent Anderson is here. He knows about this. Is doing a better integration, as Mallory's saying, in local land use decisions and development decisions about what impact that has on water consumption and trying to better integrate the planning for water and land use together. So I think this is an area that is deserving of and is getting more attention as we go forward. Okay. Mallory, thank you so much. We're going to move on, okay? And our next panelist that we have up here, we've been joined by Dr. Frazier at the panel, but we're going to jump over Ryan here, and we're going to go to Bert Granberg. Now, Bert, as I mentioned before, is my colleague at Wasatch Front Regional Council, and he's the lead for our analytics group. So they specialize in understanding and communicating current and future transportation, land use, and socioeconomic, so that's development patterns for our region on the Wasatch Front. He's going to be sharing some information about the analytical tools and resources that exist that support planning initiatives and planning for growth. Bert, take it away.
Thanks, Andrew. While we get my slide deck up, hopefully I can just kind of communicate the advance like Mallory did. Just want to say that what Mallory showed, the projections that the Gardner Policy Institute does is really integral to what we do in looking at how land use is going to change in the region and also how the transportation demand placed on the system is going to change. So we're great partners, and we try to take the statewide work that they do and kind of build upon it.
Now I'm just going to interrupt for one moment and do a sound check for folks online because we have this one microphone. Are you able to hear Bert okay?
Yes, we can hear him.
Okay, sounds good. Thank whoever it is that's answering that.
It's the IT that's supposed.
Okay, way to go, Jessica, IT. Thank you very much. Okay, Bert, go ahead.
Okay, I won't see the slides yet, but I think they're coming. So As Andrew mentioned, my name is Bert Granberg. I lead the analytics group at Wasatch Front Regional Council. And I really think about what the work that we do within my group, our group, as kind of 1/3 travel demand modeling, trying to figure out where folks are going to be traveling and how that's going to have an impact on the system. 1/3 land use modeling and 1/3 kind of miscellaneous tasks as assigned. And a lot of that kind of miscellaneous assignment category gets handled with geographic information systems. And so as a little bit of a warning, I'm going to take us through a pretty quick tour of some of the things that we're involved with in the analytics group at WFRC, and there are going to be a lot of maps. So I hope that's okay. I'm going to move fast and with the goal of sort of exposing you to some of the things that we're doing and some of the resources that are available. And of course, all the work we're doing is meant to support the transportation and land use planning work that's done within the Wasatch Front region, but I think it has some applicability to a lot of other issue areas. Next slide. When we think about transportation decision-making, across state and local government, we're investing, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion a year in new projects. I mean, it's a huge amount of money. And much of that spend is driven by the pressure that's put on the transportation system during the peak hour commute. And so that's a special focus of the modeling and the data that we put together is to look at how the system's going to perform for folks getting to work and school. And to do that analysis with data and models, we need to have a really good idea of where people live today, where additional people will live as they join the region. Same thing for work. Where are the jobs now? Where do we expect employment to grow? And then with that information and a host of others that I'm just going to barely hint at, we're able to analyze transportation scenarios, like different groups of projects, different futures, including maybe how different development patterns, also individual projects themselves, and policies. So things like the road usage charge that's being UDOT and others are working on implementing, or even external forces like the change in telecommuting that we're seeing during the pandemic, and presumably a lot of that will stay around. So key questions. To get at these key questions, we've got to put together a lot of information resources and then some models to work with that, and then we can produce essentially performance metrics that we can use to evaluate different potential futures. Next slide. So let's look at my notes here for 1 second. So we have a travel demand model, we have a land use model, they work together. And really, like, another critical model to the work that we do are all these different data sets. And if you think about it, data that's depicting the existing system or its usage or where people live or employment locations, local land use policy, all that data, most of it in map form, it's really a model of the real world, right? So you got all these little models, and then we're going to take that data, which fits under the model category in some respects, and we're going to put it into more powerful models that try and simulate things like real estate development and folks getting from their home location to their office during the commute. And so the first task is to just gather tons and tons of information, and we can only do it with the strength of great partnerships with folks at the university's Gardner Policy Institute and city and county level, the state agencies that are involved in transportation, the transit agency, our federal partners, and then also consultants and other interested parties in the private sector. So big piece of what we do is getting all this stuff to come together so that we can work with it. Okay, so very quickly, we'll take a look at the residential intensity. And you can see I've got a map that shows Salt Lake County on the south to the northern part of Weber County. And just for reference in my slides, I put in a little star for where the Weber State Ogden campus was, and then I realized today that Andrew got off at the Davis campus when he was driving us here. So I quickly added a few other stars. So residential intensity, concentrated, very concentrated in the Salt Lake City area, West Valley area, a little bit in the Ogden area, but a lot of single family, low intensity. And then employment, the distribution of employment, that's kind of what it looks like for our region. You can see job centers that you're probably all familiar with. But this is the kind of information that we've got to have to make the models work. Next. Earlier this year, we published a map using data from the census and the IRS that shows workers' origins, where they live, and their destinations and their commute, where they're going to work across the Wasatch Front. And so this map is using that interactive map that we have online to show where, or for Ogden, where people who work in Ogden live. And it's coloring the zones. The darker zones are where you've got more of Ogden's workers, and 13,000 of Ogden's workers live in Ogden, and you'll see that 4,000 some live in Roy, and 473 live in Kaysville. So like, this is really fine-grained data, and I'll have a link on at the end of the slide deck, and you can get to our maps.wrc.org page, and you can go pull up this commuter map yourself. The Region 2 director at UDOT was telling me that at the UDOT conference last week, he said, "Hey, thanks for that. I spent 3 hours of my afternoon on that the first day, and didn't get any other work done." So it's a really interesting data to work with. So
I'll just interject there that Bert's making a great point. We look at our transportation system, and you can sometimes look at it in isolation, just thinking about how congested is a road or how many people are on the train or on the trail. But to actually have data that tells you where people are starting and where they're ending, where they live and where they work, tells you a lot about your community and the development patterns and the jobs that are accessible and the educational opportunities that are accessible. It's just I feel like this reflects a broadening of the way we think about the overall functioning of our community and help us make good decisions.
Yeah, I mean, what really matters most is how we connect to destinations, and I'll be talking about that in a few slides. It's not how fast we travel, it's how quickly we can get to where we need to go, right? Okay, so current commuting patterns, definitely interesting stuff when you're talking about transportation modeling. Next slide. Local general plans. So this is key for our land use models. We want to know not only what can you build today, what can you walk into the counter at a city and get a permit for, but what are they thinking about allowing 10, 20 years down the road? That information is in the general plans. And since we're working on transportation project planning through 2050 right now, like, we've got to look this far forward. So this map is showing data we've compiled and generalized from every city along the Wasatch Front, and sort of like generally what they're allowing in their general plans in the future. And it also has the intensity, like how many dwelling units per acre, or what the commercial like floor to area ratio is. And in this particular map, we're showing it in the context of where the front runner stations are. But this region-wide general plan information is key to forecasting where new jobs are going to go and where new residential is going to go. Next slide. And then on top of that, we've worked with every city in the region, and Andrew mentioned this when he got started, to have folks delineate centers at 4 different levels, from the neighborhood level to the metropolitan center level. And these are areas where cities are aspiring for a level of growth that may not yet be indicated in their general plans. So when we're thinking again about modeling the future land use, we've got to know what's in the general plans. That's the base. And then we raise that up a little bit where the cities have communicated with us that they aspire to have maybe a little bit more than what's in their current plan. And that's what these centers reflect. And we spent a lot of time this summer, spring and summer, connecting with every single city to have them review these and give us input on the boundaries for these centers, Wasatch Choice Centers. Next slide. This sounds maybe a little bit circular, but to look at any sort of future of the Wasatch Front, we've got to know what transportation improvements are planned. And we work with, again, cities, counties, UDOT, UTA, to put together the regional transportation plan every 4 years, and different sets of projects for the regional transportation plan get tested, and that impacts land use. There's kind of a feedback cycle. So really, to have any idea what the future is going to look like, you got to have some idea of what's coming in the way of enhancements to the transit system, new roads, that kind of thing. When I put this slide deck together, just one more kind of re-emphasis of this. Like, I'm pulling everything from resources that are online. So when I get done, even though I'm going through these fairly quickly, you'll have a link to go explore these maps yourself. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we've talked about data. We've talked about information. Now let's talk a little bit about modeling tools and forecasts. I mentioned that we have 2 major models at WFRC, and we work with our partners in the Provo-Orem Metropolitan Planning Organization, Mountain Land Association of Governments, to maintain a common model. Even though we have 2 different jurisdictions, we work across the boundaries, and it all runs together because we're really one urban region now. But those 2 models, the travel demand model, which simulates trips, those origins and destinations that I showed in the commuter interactive map, and then something we call the real estate market model, or REM, which is our land use model, which simulates developers adding new commercial and residential spaces to keep up with the demand that's being placed on our region by our projected growth. From those models, we output forecasts, and we'll look at these in a little bit more detail, but things like, what are the traffic conditions going to be? What are city populations going to be? Sort of like a finer grained view of the overall state and county projections that Gardner Policy Institute does. What's our urban form going to look like? And even what is future air quality going to look like as we add population and add vehicles and those kinds of things. Okay, so next slide. So one of the really important questions from these models is where we're going to add additional households, and that real estate market model interacting with the transportation model predicts where we're going to add intensity, and it draws upon those general plans that I showed earlier and the Wasatch Choice Centers to try and simulate where real estate developers are going to add capacity for housing units. And in this map, you can see a lot of development kind of on the lower west side along the West Davis corridor. There's definitely some development that's a little bit harder to see in the most urban areas. And if we extended this map to the south, you'd see a lot of redevelopment in the existing cores and a lot of greenfield development happening on the remaining open land. Next. Go up one. Pretty please. Where will we add jobs? And I should mention that we update these projections currently every 4 years. We're looking at updating them every 2 years. We definitely have employment centers that the general plans, the zoning, these Wasatch Choice Centers envision as being the ideal places for jobs to go. And that's where the model tries to balance out those opportunities and put down future jobs so that we can do those commuting trips right from home to work in the travel model. We've got to keep this updated. We've got to incorporate market conditions, but then we also have to go one step above that and incorporate things that are not really driven by the market. So like the big contracts that the Falcon Hill area have received lately. I guess that's right up there, right? That's not necessarily a market condition, so we've got to have to kind of add on top of what the real estate market model does. Next. What will traffic volumes be? This map is showing just the colored kind of a heat map style coloring of what the traffic volumes are going to be. Spoiler alert, I-15 is still going to be critical, but you can see even, a lot of other roads are carrying volume. Volume's maybe not the most interesting thing to look at, although we do that in this interactive map. Let's go to the next slide. Where the traffic is growing is something that our model can tell us as well. So you can see the darker red lines are where the traffic volume is growing more than 20,000 vehicles per day. Like this is the kind of information that planners at WFRC, at the city level, at the UDOT level, UTA level, are looking at, trying to figure out where, whether that additional growth is something we can take, or whether we need some kind of a project to kind of reduce that pressure or spread that pressure around.
And Bert, let me just confirm here, like when you look at these and we put these maps together on how traffic will grow, this is, as you've noted, based on the relationship between transportation demand and use and where jobs are projected to be located and where homes are likely to be located. So this reflects that intersection between land use and development, economic development, housing, and transportation all together.
That's right. We're putting homes down in the future through 2050. We're putting jobs down. We're figuring out what those connections are, and that results in the traffic growth that you're seeing in the map. Next. We also, with the travel demand model, look at how transit use is going to change. We're adding people, I think, statewide. I don't know the exact number for the Wasatch Front off the top of my head, but statewide, we're going to be at 5 million in 2050, according to your 2017 projections.
Yeah.
Yes, 5 million Utahns in 2050. So we're adding people. Transit ridership is going to grow as a result of that, and as a result of better transit options. And you can see some graphs here showing local and these like enhanced or core bus routes that are more frequent and have nicer amenities. They grow. Front runner boardings grows in our model, and then the sort of funky flag shaped graph on the right shows the mode share of each of the transit modes, and this sort of new concept of really good frequent local bus service that's called core or enhanced bus service really takes off in the model. The model likes that, and some of the other modes shift around a little bit as some of those well-designed frequent bus routes come online and become popular. Next, I keep hitting the button to advance my slides. It's not working, but thank you very much for running the show. And then this map is a little bit more obscure, but this is taking into consideration the growth in traffic, the transportation projects, where people are going to live and work, and the capacity on the roads, and then also the relief that the transit system provides to folks who would otherwise drive cars, and tries to show sort of a relative map of where congestion conditions will occur in the future. And again, those are good places to target some kind of a project, to plan some kind of a upgrade to the road system or a competing transit offering. Next, yes. And the whole philosophy behind the investment that we're making in building these data resources, sharing them, using them across the transportation partners and land use interested partners, is that better data, better tools, better models are going to help us make better decisions. And that's going to mean that we prioritize the right projects, we schedule them optimally, and we get benefits that we can measure and communicate across a list of 10 sort of goal areas that are associated with the Wasatch Choice vision. Everything from manageable and reliable traffic conditions to cleaner air to housing choices and affordability, open space, as Andrew mentioned, and just livable, healthy communities. So that's the whole slate of against which we are trying to evaluate some of these potential futures and sets of projects. All right. The last thing I'm going to talk about in any kind of detail is access to opportunities, which is a key metric that we and our transportation partners are using to evaluate potential projects. And that metric is access to opportunities, ATO for short. You can also think of it as the accessibility of destinations that are really important to you, like jobs. And it's kind of a family of metrics. And really it's taking into consideration two things at the same time. One is the mobility that we have, basically how fast can we travel? And two, the proximity of where we live and the things that we need to get to. How far apart are they in space? And both of those things are important. You can travel 100 miles an hour all you want, out in the middle of Nevada on Highway 50. It's probably not legal, but you're not going to get to much, right? So like, it's not just how fast you can go, it's what's important to you and how far away is it. And that mobility and proximity set of measures combines into this accessibility or access to opportunities concept, the ease of reaching destinations you care about. Next. So if we look at access to jobs across the Wasatch Front region, by auto on the left, by transit on the right, no surprise, there's a richer offering of jobs and a bigger total of jobs right in the middle of Salt Lake County, whether you're traveling by car or transit. So within a typical commute, you can get to more jobs if you're located in the areas that are red. However, it's a big region and it's valuable for folks to look locally as they think about addressing weaknesses they have in accessibility or building on the strengths they have as well. So next slide. We built a tool that can go in, you can go in and look at the access to opportunities scores for auto and transit for relative to any kind of sub area of the Wasatch Front. So in this case, we've zoomed in on Southern Weber County and we've recalibrated all those numbers so they're relative to the average within Southern Weber County. And you can kind of see in this case how the accessibility landscape varies across that area relative to kind of general accessibility in the Ogden and surrounding area. So this is for auto. It's not a lot to learn from there. It's there's a little bit higher accessibility to jobs closer to I-15. And certainly not quite as much access to jobs as some of the areas further south. Let's go next slide. And now we're looking at the same concept, but for transit, right? And you can see that there's quite a bit of variability in the landscape of access to jobs using the UTA transit offerings in the area. So, in terms of thinking about projects, like projects that improve access to opportunities are good projects. In terms of land use, you want to get the right type of investment in the right spot relative to the transportation system and vice versa. So build on your strengths and if you can, try to address some of your weaknesses. It's kind of a neutral measure, but it's a landscape that isn't as easily seen outside of the area that you're immediately familiar with. Okay, next slide. The last thing, this is just a brief mention. I haven't talked about the active transportation system. I just want to make a point that we, in the last 3 years, have spent a lot of time working with our partners to build out resources that depict where there are bike facilities, where bike facilities are planned to be added to the network. This map is showing sort of the level of stress that's associated with roads and other bicycle facilities within this area. We also have a bike model that we're we kind of have an initial version of that we can use to estimate how much bicycle usage is happening now and maybe in a future when facilities get built out. So just we're not, this is a big priority for us. I just didn't feature it much in the slideshow. And then to conclude, next slide. I promised some links, and if I were to recommend one, maps.wfrc.org should allow you to access almost everything that I've showed today, our map gallery. And then we also have a link for the Wasatch Choice map that Andrew started with. Really, you can just Google that. Anytime you want to look at a Wasatch Choice map, it'll be the first link you find. Invite everyone to go out and check out these resources. And if you want to actually talk to somebody about data, models, existing conditions, the future, by all means, reach out. I love getting inquiries from folks who are thinking about using our information tools or collaborating. So got my contact information entered into the record.
Bert, thank you very much. I'm not exactly sure of the method of verification of humanity you're implying there. We don't need to go into that. Wow, lots of data, lots of information. I'm just going to ask you sort of one following question about not just about how people, I guess, access the data. You've shared information about that, but also how does the data that you have and the analytical tools that you have, how does that sort of relate to the information that's held in other sources or used by other people? Like how should people think about the data that they have and the data that we have and how they kind of relate together? And the reason I'm asking that question, Bert, is like, I just look around the audience here. If you're in county economic development, like Kent and Megan, or if you're in, city management, like Brigham, or if you're a city elected official, like Marcia, and you're thinking about, well, there's all this information. How should I use this? And does it how am I going to base my decisions on this data? And you might also be thinking, well, is this data somebody else's data? Like, this is WFRC's data, but it's not consistent with what we have. So how should people think about that relationship between the decision-making that they're using and the data they have and what we've got that you're making available to people?
That's a good question, Andrew. I wish you would have asked me that in the car. Then I could have an answer. I think the key is that this information, it's so broad and it's so deep. Utah, the Wasatch Front region, we just have better information resources largely due to the coordination and partnership than just about any place. I mean, it's really a great place to live if you're a data interested human, or maybe an Android or whatever I am. But yeah, I mean, if you're at a city level, a city of a certain size, you probably have a GIS staff, you probably have planners, you might have consultants doing work for you. I think the main thing is that we don't want folks to go out and try and build this kind of data themselves. Like, the key is that you understand sort of the ecosystem of possibilities that are out there in terms of people and data and tools. And if you don't, that you reach out and learn a little bit about that, or your people learn a little bit about that, because it's really expensive to do this stuff from scratch, but we can do some really cool things with limited resources if you connect with everything that's already out there and available. And so that's why, put my contact information there. That may not be, if you're an elected official, you may not be like, oh yeah, I want a bunch of GIS data and start playing around. Maybe that's your thing, but you probably have expertise, technical expertise. And if you ever start on a project or an analysis with someone supporting it, make sure that they connect with all the existing resources that are out there.
Great. Thank you so much, Bert. Yes, Brigham. Speak up so that people can hear you also.
Okay. So one of the things that I think is the most absent element of data that we do not have in our
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah. So if you look at Bureau of Labor Statistics data, it will tell you the occupations and where those people work within a certain geographic area. So that's great if you're Salt Lake or you're Lehigh or you're Ogden and you're attracting companies to be in your area. Farmington and most of the Wasatch Front, a lot of us are in large part bedroom communities. You showed that from your data that showed where people go for
Yeah.
work. You have Roy, you have 4,000 people leaving Roy and going into Ogden every day. What I think that there is a huge deficit of in information that I think will be pivotal in helping us create nodes like transit-oriented event development centers around our train stations or in different communities, so people aren't just directly commuting to Salt Lake. Davis-Weber County, you have almost 80,000 people a day that drive into Salt Lake. So what there's a problem with is that we don't know where those occupations live. So I can look at it and I can say, oh, Farmington, if I get neural labor statistic data for my MSA and it tells me how many people work there, the reality is, yeah, Farmington, as far as occupations, we got a lot of people who work on roller coasters. We got a lot of people who sell stuff at big box retailers. But that's not the true, most of those people don't even live in Farmington. They may live in other cities or they make a small population of the number of people that live in our community. But that being said, there's probably a lot of really skilled labor. And the only way to really that live in Farmington, but the only way to really narrow that down is to say, this is the educational attainment level of our community. It doesn't say those are developers, those are what have you. It doesn't give you an information, it doesn't give you information on what those people do as a job. And I don't think any city has the resources, to your point. Primary research is expensive. We have our own GIS staff, we have planning staff, but we do not have the resources to do that kind of analysis. And I think that's very important, especially for communities that are trying to create urban centers and have a more urban core that is connected to other areas, but keeps those jobs local. That's one thing we want to do. But also we want to reduce the amount of commute times that people have. And so that kind of information could be extremely helpful. And I don't know how to get that. I've explored different options. Cell phone data. Mac Godfrey had a company that and still does that, I believe, tracks cell phone data. We've worked with him, he's a former mayor of Ogden, right? And we played around with it. It showed where people from Farmington, it's kind of spooky, but it showed where people from, and you had the same data. It showed where people in different communities, where they were going and using their cell phones.
Yeah.
So you could say, oh, this person's going to Cottonwood Corporate Center every day, or this person's going, but that's about as close as we could get. And then you're assuming, you're guessing, well, if they're going to that area, they probably have this type of job.
So at its heart, Brigham, what you're talking about is data about the folks that live in your community of Farmington and the type of skill sets or training or experience they have. And you really don't have a way of knowing that, because if you did know that, it could help you make some decisions about what types of development should happen in your community, what types of jobs you could recruit, what kind of types of organizations or businesses you could recruit to take advantage of that talent pool that exists. So what do you all think about that?
Have you ever played with On the Map from the census?
I have, but
It doesn't
not
get you the detail you want.
It didn't have it does show our inflow and outflow. I think that's super helpful and it does show our commuting patterns. But again, it doesn't give down to the detail. Every city wants to be the next Lehigh. Every city wants to be the next, well, to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
They want to have the problems that we have. but I think that realistically, like if I'm a smaller town and I know that, let's say my former employer, Syracuse, if my former employer has big ambitions of being being the new tech center, maybe their ambitions change if they know that they've got a lot of people in their community that work in an industrial capacity.
They do have NAICS codes in On the Map now.
Oh, they do?
They
Okay.
just did an update, so I would
Okay.
just go poke. I don't know
Yeah.
what exactly you're
No, that's
looking
great.
for, but it's always a cool tool to just kind of play around with.
I got to think about this some more, but really briefly, what it sounds like what you want is like, what are the core skill sets in my community that are leaving the community that maybe we could attract back home
Yep.
if we got the right economic
Yeah, the right
opportunity to come.
Real estate product
Yeah.
or opportunities.
I'll think about it.
Question on more draconian. It seems like I think the number is either 80 or over 100,000 people are leaving every day from Davis Weaver down to Salt Lake, and yet we keep making that freeway wider and wider. Have you explored with your modeling techniques what happens if you just did not allow that traffic pattern to be easier and you just let it manage itself? What if, or even worse, you made the lanes smaller, took them out? I'm just exploring crazy ideas here, but it seems to me we exacerbate the problem when we keep making the lanes bigger. Instead of these companies locating in these different areas, they just keep growing in Salt Lake. Therefore, we put more and more lanes on the freeway. You watch Highway 89 now, it's already happening. If you drive all the way up 89, it's going to turn South Ogden into kind of a disaster because it's so easy now. You get up Highway 89 and then you just at Harrison and Highway 89. I don't know. It just seems to me that the more lanes we
You want that?
doesn't always work.
That was Guy Latendra, just for the record, asking that question. It's a great question. I'm just, Bert, you want to do a quick?
Yeah, I mean, the models can do that. I mean, we can also explore if we get rid of all the left turns too. I mean, like that capability exists, but when we're comparing scenarios or individual projects, we're comparing them against a no build scenario, right? Where nothing, in the case of like the regional transportation plan, well, how do those projects improve things against the no build scenario? The no build scenario is pretty ugly, right? I mean, like things break down and people can't get places. So you want to make your set of projects look great compared to the no build scenario. But yeah, I mean, the short answer is we can do that.
Yeah, let me tackle that one a little bit also, because Guy is asking actually a really important question here, and getting at an academic concept, or actually it's really a research concept that's been proven. It's called induced demand. That if you build more capacity in your transportation system, you're not just going to serve the demand that exists today. You're actually, human behavior is such that if you widen a road and it's easier to get somewhere on that road, then more people are going to use that road and more development is going to occur on the extent of where that road goes. And so it is a challenging development decision-making process to say, well, we anticipate growth's going to occur, we anticipate development, we anticipate demand, so let's expand the capacity of our transportation system. And then it leads to some of the issues that you're talking about. Well, more people are using it. Now, in the case that you got at, and picking up what Brigham was saying before, the 80,000 or so folks that are commuting on a daily basis out of Davis and Weber County elsewhere for work. One approach to that would be, and I know guys throwing this out as just sort of a thought exercise here, right? One approach would be, don't improve I-15, allow the traffic congestion to build dramatically. And then is that going to have an impact on people's decision-making? Sure, some people's decision-making it will. And that might make people make a decision, I'm going to seek for a job in Davis or Weber County, as opposed to commuting to a job easily in Salt Lake County. Utah has not employed a strategy of intentionally limiting transportation capacity and allowing congestion to build in order to shape outcomes. The approach that I think we've tried to take, and that Bert was getting at in talking about this relationship between transportation and homes and jobs, is thinking about what are the opportunities that exist in proximity to where people live. So maybe the way to come at this is, how can Weber and Davis counties, and I know there's a lot of work happening in this economic development space in Weber and Davis counties very successfully, to promote job creation within Weber and Davis counties to give more people the option to not have to commute out of their area, right? And if we can do it in a way that actually takes advantage of the skill sets that we have in this area, that are the kinds of jobs that will be good good wage jobs, jobs of the future, and we can locate them right here, then that in of itself reduces that pressure to flee the community to go somewhere else for jobs, which is better in so many ways. It reduces traffic congestion, it reduces air quality emissions, it reduces the amount of time people have to spend traveling, which takes time out of their day of the things that they really want. So this mix of where jobs are located, where homes are located, and transportation, and trying to have you might call it a complete community within a given area is really, really critical to our planning for the future. So good question. Okay, we're going to move on. We've talked about broadly population projections. We've talked about analytical tools to help us with decision-making. And now we're going to go to Dr. Ryan Fraser from Weber State University, who is our last panelist, to talk about good community planning. So which is sort of another level of what we've been talking about here. Now, Dr. Fraser leverages the power of geographic information science and didn't I sound excited when I said that? I like this stuff, yeah. And remote sensing to convey information about landscapes, patterns, and ecosystems. And again, he's going to be giving us an overview of the importance of good community planning. Dr. Fraser, take it away.
You bargained for so much more with me. You're going to be glad for it. May I be the screen share? Thank you. These technical Zoom considerations you have to have in the current situation is just wonderful, but we're here now. Okay, so I'm actually a geographer, guys. I don't know if you know about geography. Anyone have a good idea of that? Good grasp on it? It is not just capitals, rivers, state names, countries, though I can name like a good 200 of them off the top of my head. Geography is actually this interdisciplinary cross-sectional meeting place of a bunch of different things at the same time, which is why I have a really nice view on this, because I have different perspectives of this problem, or this, honestly, this nice problem to have a growing problem. So I've titled my talk, The Geographer's Growing Perspectives. I have different views on that. Can I just ask, was anyone up here for re-election yesterday? Hopefully it went well.
I got the bronze medal.
Oh.
Unfortunately, you only took the gold and the silver winner.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but Marsh is very much better.
Here's the good news. Use whatever I'm about to tell you to pester the two people I did with.
Right.
Okay, so take some notes here. Okay, so I asked that very important question. I do want to point out that the first speaker here told you about the Wasatch Front Regional Council, what they do, the important work they're doing. Our second speaker here reminded you that we have growth and we expect growth. Growth has happened. You cannot stop it. Don't put the big wall at the border and say no Californians. They're coming either way, guys. They'll come in the other way. And our third person, Bert, here told you we have all this data and models. I'm here just to remind you about the importance of using all these things these people told you about. So let's get into it. Oh, my department heads would kick me in the butt if I didn't say I'm at Weber State University. Fantastic university. Great, great, great. Come ask us lots of questions when you can. Whew. All right. We're going to talk about a few growth examples from the last 20 years. I'm going to bring you into our current situation. I'll offer you my 2 cents of advice, which is really like $3 of advice. So please take all of it that you can. And we'll end with some takeaways, because it's always good to remind you what you just found out. Here we go. So the next few slides, I'm going to put up a few examples of growing cities and some of the problems they may have encountered. I'm going to give you clue by clue, and I want you to either raise your hand or if you're on Zoom, give me the old wavy hand emoji if you think you know it. You ready? I'm going to try and guess here. This city has the most residents that eat out frequently of any city in the US. Not too helpful.
I'll just note that if you're on Zoom and you want to answer these questions, you may not be able to do hand raise, but you can type into the Q&A if you have an answer. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's great.
All right, go ahead. Keep going.
Largest medical center in the US. Kind of narrows it down. There are only so many large cities with medical centers, right? The 7th largest mall in the US. Come on, guys. It's not Ogden. I'll give you a hint. Has a name shared with a US general. It's that guy right there. You guys don't look at old pictures? Come on now. All right. I'll give you one last hint. They lost the World Series last night. Hashtag spoiler alert. It's Houston. Houston. Let's look at Houston. What has happened here? Here's Houston as the land cover map. This is wonderful data generated by the federal government. They're great at doing this stuff. They update it every 5 years. Can't say enough more positive. The USGS for making this data. Anyways, big important things to note. Red categories, built, that means some improvement upon the land has happened, some structure exists, that kind of thing. Darker red, higher intensity, lower red, less intensity. Then you have your natural categories and your water and the other ones there. Here's 2019. Now, the really nice thing is this is generated from remotely sensed data from Landsat 5. I love it, Landsat. You guys love Landsat. You just don't know you love Landsat. Trust me. So the nice thing is it's been collecting data for 40 years. We can go back in time. So we're going to go back to 2001. Does anyone remember where they were in 2001? Yeah, I was not in Utah, so I can say that very easily. But, oh, whoa, wrong direction. Excuse me. Here we go, back to 2001. This is just the change map of that. So what we have here is the red is an increase in built over those last 20-ish years. Do you see a pattern? All right, fair enough. Keep it in the back of your head. I'm just going to remind you that no growth does not come without its issues. For instance, in Houston, you may have found that there are some disparities that are increased by this growth in the last 20 years. It's kind of something people usually don't appreciate about their urban areas. You may also know that Houston has almost no zoning, very little, if any. And that may have, in fact, affected recovery from hurricanes for the past 20 years as well. Okay, growth is good, but you have to put something around that. You have to be planning for it and thinking about it. Let's move on to our next city. This one's a little more closer to us, if you will, maybe across the continental divide. So this city has the largest bronze statue in the US, or actually in the world. It's 50 tons. It's a lot of tons. All right, this city is the second largest hotel in the world. This should make it a little bit better. Second largest hotel. No?
It's got to be Vegas.
This man wins. Give him a gold star, people. I'm gonna stop with the guesses here, but 300 weddings daily was my next good one for you guys. And you can find the most major landmarks within 4 miles. It is Vegas, baby. Vegas, Vegas, Vegas. I mean, they got the Eiffel Tower, they got the Statue of Liberty, they got this 50-ton bronze statue, which is the MGM statue, if you needed that.
Wait, it's the brightest look. What do you mean it's the brightest location on Earth?
The Strip apparently is the brightest location on the Earth, as I found out through Googling oddlasvegasfacts.com.
Wow, okay, all right.
I was there not too long ago. I agreed the Luxor thing is very bright.
Okay.
All right. So here's Las Vegas in 2019. Again, our standard land cover data here. Red is built, and this kind of brown, soft yellow, beigey color is pretty much desert, shrub, those kind of mixed landscapes. But if you've driven through here, it's a lot of dirt. I say that kindly. I am also in a geology department, and I appreciate dirt for what it is as well. Let's get back in our time machine. You guys ready? We're going back to 2001. Here's your urban increase over that time. And I know you think I've just pulled out urban increase, but no, friends, that's actually just the most obvious thing on the map here. The blue here is your decrease in Lake Powell over that area, but that red is all urban increase. Do you see a pattern here as well? Cool, cool. I see a lot of heads nodding. I'd like to high five you all. You're getting it. Good job. But again, growth does not come without problems when you can't expect it, plan for it, and think about it. So home ownership, very difficult in Las Vegas currently. Lots of questions around if people can buy homes and live there. On top of that, we have urban sprawl and associated health problems that come with it. Okay, well, Las Vegas. I got one more example for you guys. My friends have told me everything good comes in threes, so I couldn't just do two and stop. All right, you ready? This city does not practice daylight savings. That's a pretty good hint. There's only like 5 of them out there.
Phoenix.
Oh, good job. Congrats. Gold stars all over. Basketball, baseball, Birth Stevie Nicks. You guys know you love that Rumors album. I do too. And outlawed harming saguaro cactus, which is like a real law down there, if you didn't know. Yeah. So anyways, it's Phoenix, as you correctly guessed. Fantastic job. Here's Phoenix in 2019. It's looking great, right? We got our same red as our built. Your kind of beigey tones are your shrub, scrub, sand, vegetation kind of thing. And these dark brown are agriculture, believe it or not. I'll explain the big brown in the middle there. It looks obvious, right? Anyhow, I want to call attention to a few areas here. You see the splotch in the middle of Phoenix, south of Phoenix, and a big brown grouping on the right. No change there for two reasons. One of them, or two of those circles are mountain preserves. That's the lighter beige, and the dark browns are both Indian reservations. Show you a picture of what that looks like. Here's your back in time look. Do you see the development here? Wildly large, right? Now I want you to keep this pattern in mind because it's going to maybe appear again. I'll let you be the judge. Anyways, here's your photo of this one very odd peculiarity spot here. On the right is Scottsdale. On the left is the Gila River Indian Reservation. Very different, right? So that's what that looks like. Okay. So again, growth doesn't come without its problems if it's unplanned or unmitigated, or not unmitigated, I won't say, but either way, unplanned, unhandled. We have the worst traffic in Phoenix. Regularly makes the poll as worst, also for most of the deaths. Also, the norm is 10-lane highways. Have you guys ever been down there for that? It's wild. All right, back to the point I'm trying to make here. Also, perhaps a lack of water in the very, very near future. This is, you might have heard in the news, the first time the Central Arizona project has cut water delivery by 20%. That's a very drastic cut in 1 year, no? Thank you for the nods. I appreciate that participation. Whew. All right, well, let's go back to here. Let's come back home to Utah, to the Wasatch Front. What we have is essentially in the last 20 years, nearly unending growth. Look at this economic growth. You guys should be high-fiving yourselves. This is good stuff. Look at this. That line is going up. All right, well, you know, like I said, not every rose has its thorn. So we have larger and more roads. However, we may have a quality of life issue with those. We have more and more single-family residential building, which is fantastic. We have increasing demands on the current ecosystem. Perhaps you guys don't read science as well as I read a lot of science due to the nature of my position. So I'm just to hit that my translator on this. Looks a little bit like this. It says less lake, more dust, dust pollutes air, dust travels in air, lands on snowpack, reduces snowpack, reduces available water, reduces snow, hurts economy, may contaminate water. That's my translator for you guys. That's good. So increasing demand, thank you, appreciate that. Increasing demands on the ecosystem, increasing water demands. Maybe you saw the headlines in the Tribune about running out of water. They're also in the desert at times as well. Maybe you've experienced the inversion and seen the air pollution. If you guys aren't on to this one, maybe I didn't wake you up enough. We've all seen it, right? Well, where does this effort get us? Well, we got increasing traffic, rising home prices, and air quality issues. These are things that are not going to go away. These are things that are going to get worse if we continue on the path we are on. Just want to let that sit there for a moment for you guys. All right, so let's look at maps. I am a geospatial kind of person. I love looking at maps. I love everything Bert had in his talk. I mean, the data the Wasatch Front Regional Council has made available to everyone is amazing. I cannot stress that enough. This nice AOI here, area of interest, that's that black outline around the area. Did a little smoothing on it just to make it nice and appearable, but right there on the website, very useful. Here's our land cover data from 2001, 2019. Big change, right? Pick any big changes out. I know it's a little hard from this distance, and online I also know it can be a little bit tricky. So I went ahead and made a GIF. I know it's GIF with a soft G. I can't get over it either. Here's the GIF. The kids love these things. I mean, technically at college, they love other GIFs of like cats doing funny things, but it didn't seem quite appropriate for this talk. So here we are.
You could have thrown the badger in.
Oh, the badger, yes. Waldo the wildcat doing a little dance up there. Big changes happening here, right? Does anyone want to call out one or two they see?
The island's not the island anymore.
Yes, that's a good one.
You hear that? The comment was the island is not the island anymore.
Mallory here just mentioned to me about that as well, I believe. Anyone else feeling brave?
What's the increasing brown down?
Oh yes, that kind of light color on the bottom left, that's a forest fire, friends. That's a big one. That was 2017, I want to say it happened in. Anyways,
there's more on the left side of the map and the southern side. There's more red and in western Utah County, and then in southwestern Salt Lake County, and then on the western edge of Davis County and Weber County. So more development in all those areas.
I love it. Thank you. I much appreciate it.
Sort of stating the obvious here, but trying to help them along here.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
This is usual for my college class. I don't mind, it's normal stuff. I'm going to make this easy for everyone. I'm just going to pop this back and give us our usual view here. And again, north is outside, or I guess technically it's that way for you guys. It's this way for me, just to fit on the side a little bit easier. There you go. There's your change. We have red and urban increase. We have blue for water loss. And that orange, as Mallory mentioned, was forest loss down the bottom there. Now, I'm a big guy. I like numbers. I like data. I like to look at that stuff. I mean, it's geospatial data. It's kind of up in my wheelhouse here. So if this doesn't, ring the pattern.
Ryan, let me just interject for just a second, just ask a clarifying question.
Sure.
Is what we're seeing here in our region, the red, is this areas that went from undeveloped to developed?
Yes.
Okay, so this is not new housing units, for example. It's just undeveloped land to developed land.
It changed from one of the other categories like shrub or agriculture or things of that into an urban category.
Okay,
it is
thank
not
you.
within urban change. It is from a conversion completely.
Thank you.
The pattern look familiar to you guys? Seen it once or twice? You might have seen it once or twice. Maybe less so than the other cities I showed you. Maybe we've planned a little better in the last 20 years, and maybe that reminds us that we need to keep planning and keep anticipating and keep doing the good things we already started with. Anyhow, again, I'm a numbers person. Here's your map on the left, a little bit smaller, but what can I tell you? I like numbers. So here's a nice bar graph. Kept it nice and simple here. You can see here I've circled two areas, one being all the developed categories, the other one being the mostly shrubby, herbaceous, hay pasture, and crops category. Kind of puts it in stark relief, right? Yikes, but not terrible. If you think about it, that's 115 square miles more of developed land. And I was looking for a good comparable because 115 square miles is kind of hard to think about, right? Like, what does that really mean per se? Well, how is 24 Fremont Islands in 20 years? Or 115 Utah State Capitol grounds in 20 years? That's what that means. So you have 115 square miles grow in the developed and about 100 square mile loss for the other categories here. And you can see most people would assume it's all from crops, but that's not really what the data is showing you in this case. This is important, right? This is the landscape on which things happen on. The landscape supports all the ecosystem services that let us keep living here and produce the things we need to live, like water and air and so forth and so forth, right? So we want you to think about that as you keep moving forward here. I do want to underline this one thing. So when I gave this talk to a friend, they just told me I was a real downer, but I want to tell you, I'm not overly an optimist. I'm more of a realist. And I just want to state these facts up front for you. I'm never saying build again. That's wacky. That's just not possible. However, I am telling you to think smartly about what you do and where you do. And I'm here to offer a couple of solutions because, who wants to end on a downer? That's no fun. So I'm going to pass you guys a few suggestions here. Here's my 2 cents of advice, which is really like a lot of advice, but go ahead, write it down. Here it comes. I want to introduce you to the idea of density variation. I know single family homes are great. I know, I get it. They're fantastic. Developers love them too. It's fine. But I do want to point out to you that if we're expected to add up to another 1.5 million people in the next 30 years, you can't keep going at the same pace of density you're at right now. It's just not going to pan out, right? I mean, we can only add, so let's just thought game this out with me here for a minute. If we just keep going, we're just going to keep converting land, which is fine. That's what the market will bear. No, to keep going, but there's only so many roads you can add to handle that many people. Eventually, we're going to run out of lanes to add. And as someone mentioned before, induced demand is a very real thing. I'd like to point you to the world's largest transportation infrastructure project. Does anyone know what that is?
What you said, the world's largest transportation infrastructure project?
Yeah.
You're talking about the Belt and Road Initiative by China, or
Oh no, I was going to go with the U.S. Sorry,
go ahead.
Should shrink that down just to the U.S. It's the Big Dig in Boston, Massachusetts. A project 30 years in the plan, outdated when it was made, overrun by half or double its budget. and it did not solve any traffic problems. Did make a nice greenway, I will give it that. But what it was found is they put the new lanes in and immediately there was traffic again. Induced demand is a very real thing. You can only add so many traffic lanes, friends. Anyways, density variation, back to my main point here. Not everyone can afford a single family home. It allows for different economic statuses to live within each other. It allows for more mixing. Generally, these things are viewed as positive. That's what I would say about that. Single family homes use more water, they use more energy. Anyways, I'm pitching here for density variation. Get into it, friends. If you want to add more people on the land, you got to start putting more people on the land, if you understand what I'm trying to say here. All right, my next piece of advice. First part was density, the second part is transit. And I think I have a lot of friends here who would agree with me on that topic. And you may think, oh, transit's politically risky. It's just easier to throw another lane on the highway there. Well, you know what? 77% of people said they have a favorable impression of the TRAX trains. And then 75% of people found they have a favorable impression of Front Runner. That's pretty good. I mean, it's pretty hard to get 75% of people to agree on anything. Have you ever tried to order a pizza with more than 20 people there? What topping you should get? It does not end well. The one little soft point I would point out is only about 47% of people said they had a favorable impression of bus service, and Bert kind of got into this with core service. A lot of research has shown that people view bus transportation much more favorably when it is on time, timely, frequent, and reliable. That's what I call good bus service. And that would mean like every 15 minutes and larger existing to connecting transit and so on and so forth. That approval really rises very high. Another fun concept that doesn't really involve transit is walkability. This is actually a really easy one for me to say. If you can walk to work or if you can walk to your services you need, like the grocery store or the bank or so on and so forth, you have less vehicle trips, you have less pollution, and you have less vehicle deaths. And I think we can unanimously agree, we're all in favor of less deaths.
Yes.
No holdouts. Yes. First time for everything, guys. All right. Walkability also is an enhanced sense of place. Believe it or not, when you're out and about, feet on the street, that's a Jane Jacobs idea, back a classic urban planner thoughts. Your enhanced sense of place really makes you appreciate your community more, makes you want to be involved in your community, makes you want to do lots of things in your community. So that, but you know what? I also, like I told you, I'm a numbers guy. And sometimes we need numbers to prove our things, like dollar numbers, right? What if I told you that walkable neighborhoods that are considered walkable have roughly 75% higher rents than an urban average? Does that ring your bell a little bit more? What if I told you that this includes office spaces rent for 105% more than the urban average in walkable neighborhoods? What if I told you for retail it's 121% more? I was hoping for like one person to jump up and go, yeah, I'm down with this plan, but that's okay. I got all the energy up here for myself. That's all I need. So to take this away, what I want to remind you is that growth for growth is not really the way forward. It's good, but I showed you 3 examples where it has not panned out well, right? In Houston, we got 10-lane highways that are the norm, and they're still adding highways. I have a friend who keeps moving every 10 years. When they add a new highway, she just moves to the next belt. And pretty funny to watch that happen. Las Vegas, you can just drive and drive and drive and drive until you run out of gas and you're still building. That's endless sprawl. That's not too helpful. Phoenix, I have a soft spot for Phoenix because I lived there for a few years, but I got to tell you, they're going to run out of water in 30 years, according to Arizona State University scientists. I mean, they're going to be drawing down negative amounts of water than they will be taking in, even with the Central Arizona Project providing water to them. Okay. What I want to remind you is that you people here, you elected people, you city managers, your counselors, you need to provide leadership on this. We have the data, we have the modeling, we have the things for you to use, we have people to consult. You need to use those things. Okay. Next thing you need to do while you're providing leadership is come up with a plan, which the Wasatch Front Regional Council seems pretty happy to facilitate happening, of the interconnected factors of land use, transportation, and environment. These 3 things interplay with each other, they are important to each other, and they affect everything that's going to happen on the map, so to speak. Density in transit. Sorry, I had to say it one more time just to make it stick in your brain. If you remember anything, I said those words and then I sound a little crazy because I am a little crazy about this thought. There are only so many highways we can put on the map anymore, guys. We can only put those lanes out so far, right? Right. Single family residential zoning can be exclusionary to some. We want to incorporate many people into our community. And I want you to focus on walkability or services along transit and adding transit when you can, where you can. It's important. Again, there aren't only fit so many cars on the road. It's only going to happen at some point. And I want to remind you, much like in the last 20 years, where we've had some chance to think ahead and build capacity, you have a chance now to think ahead and build capacity. Lots of research has shown if you build capacity, users will follow. Density and transit is like a chicken and egg scenario. We're not really sure which comes first, the transit or the density. So I'm going to encourage you to build one or the other first, or maybe both at the same time. Any takers? Come on, friends. You can even quote me on that. All right. Well, I'm here to tell you you're not alone in this. I'm here to tell you Weber State University is here. And this is the part where both my deans would be throwing a shoe at me if I didn't say anything. So I have to. So here you are. Weber State University is here leading by example. The university is going to be carbon neutral by 2040, which is 10 years ahead of schedule. Pretty solid. We're chipping away at that every day. I can't even tell you how much. We're also leading the way on transit with the BRT, Bus Rapid Transit in Ogden, routed right through campus, opening in 2023. I will be thrilled to get on that bus every single day, I'll tell you what. I also want to tell you about some great programs we have at Weber State, one of which I'm co-director for. It's the Northern Utah Geospatial Technology Education Program. I bet if Bert was an undergraduate right now, he would be hanging out with me most classes. He's like, no, not really. I get it.
I have an answer to that, but keep going.
Okay, fair enough. Focus a lot on geospatial technology, mapping, analysis, and display and manipulation of geospatial data. You would be surprised what's out there. If you've never pondered, find your geospatial person or find me. I'm happy to help. And I will show you the wealth that exists, even if you don't want to go to the Wasatch Front Regional Council data page, which is ridiculously loaded with data. Whew. Other thing we have here is the Sustainable Land Use Planning Certificate Program headed by Dr. Brian Dorsey, really focuses on sustainable land use planning. It is exciting and freshly redeveloped just this year and relaunched. So check us out those things. If you want to contact me, there's my email. It's just my name at weber.edu. And I'm going to leave it there.
Dr. Fraser, thank you very much. There was a question that had earlier been put into the chat about how our region, how Utah and the Wasatch Front can avoid some of the negative things that have happened to Los Angeles. I didn't go to that question before because I anticipated that your presentation was going to get at that question. What are some of the strategies that we can employ? And you delivered on that, of course, and not just Los Angeles, Las Vegas and Phoenix and other communities that are struggling with this growth. I want to, recognizing that we're near out of time here, I want to, I don't so much have a question for you, but I'd rather just sort of take everything that we've heard here and bring it back to where I started. We're growing incredibly fast. Our growth is complex in that it's not just population growth. We're growing, we're changing. We've got this mix and web of population growth and housing demand and transportation and economic development and environmental impacts, all of these things that are at play at the same time. And what Dr. Fraser has been doing is laying out some key strategies for ways that our region can address these demands and how we can grow. But I want to emphasize something, and that is it's core to what I talked about before, the Wasatch Choice vision, the shared vision for growth. And that is that there is no one right way to deal with these challenges that we're facing. And what I think is critical for our region and for all of us is to make sure that we are providing choices to people. It's not going to work for us, for any of us up here, or for any of the elected officials or city or county officials to tell residents the right way to live is you must live, for example, in a dense neighborhood. You must take transit. There are going to be people who just do not want to have that type of neighborhood. And they want to have a single family residential home and neighborhood, and they want to drive most places. And you know what? That is completely okay. And in fact, that's what the majority of people are doing now, and we think will continue to do in the future. But there is more demand now than there is supply for other choices. So these types of neighborhoods that are more of a mix of uses, a downtown community, a centered type of neighborhood where there is more density, but then there's also a lot of amenities as well, park space, shopping, restaurants. So if we can do this in our region, and this is what's embodied in this Wasatch Choice vision, is that we provide this range of options to the residents of our region, so that if you want that single family suburban type lifestyle, and that's what works for you, you can have that and you can afford it. And also, if you want to have a more sort of vibrant, walkable neighborhood that you live in, and it might be multifamily housing or condos or townhomes that are closer to restaurants and closer to amenities, and maybe you can walk to your job, then that's available also. And I think that's what we have to try to do as a community, collectively as a region, is figure out where are those locations in our region that make sense for that type of development to occur. It's not right everywhere, but we've got to provide that range of choices. And I'll just say again, that's what is embodied in this Wasatch Choice vision. Input from all of the communities in identifying those locations that it really does make sense to have a mix of uses, a mix of housing types for people that want to live in that way. And so that everybody has the option to live here and have a home they can afford, a job that, you know, provides for their family and is fulfilling to them, access to the outdoors, and overall great quality of life. That's what's at play here. That's, I think, the issues that we've been talking about all day today. I hope that this information that we've talked about has been helpful and has been interesting. There's, you can tell there's lots of great data and lots of great analysis happening. The way that we deal with our growth challenges, however, is one decision at a time. And there's 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000,000 different decisions that have to happen at the local level. My last word would be that I hope that as we in our communities and as individuals are making decisions, we're thinking about ourselves, but we're also thinking long-term about the future. And we're thinking as a community, how do we make sure that everybody in our community has a place and we have an inclusive approach so that we are providing those choices and we have great quality of life for all the residents of our region as we go forward. We can do this if we work together. So let's thank our panelists. Okay, thank you very much, folks. And then Guy, I'm going to turn it back to you. Do you have any conclusions that you want to offer?
I think that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Guys coming up. Okay. Get in camera frame.
All the way down from the balcony here at the Davis Ballroom. Thank you so much to our panelists. It was incredibly informative. What's really encouraging is the passion that you all have for doing a good job with this. It's not an accident that you guys are doing. It seems like what you love, and our community is grateful and lucky to have such talent, which is back to that induced demand. Because we have such talent, it's the fastest growing place. So maybe we should fire all you guys and no one will move here anymore. So no, I'm just kidding.
Another interesting strategy from Guy.
I'm a counter-revolutionary, I guess. So thank you all. Everyone have a great day.
Guy, thanks. And thanks to Weber State University and the Walker Institute for hosting this. It's been really terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.